Have you ever wondered why some men wake up 3, 4, even 5 times a night to urinate and still believe it's just getting older? What if I told you that the single symptom is often the first quiet warning that your prostate is under real stress and that ignoring it doesn't just cost you sleep, it slowly drains your energy, your confidence, and your sense of control over your own body? I'm speaking as a physician who has sat across from thousands of men who didn't come in angry or dramatic, but exhausted, embarrassed, and confused. They told me the same thing in different words. I'm tired of planning my life around bathrooms. I'm afraid to travel. I don't feel like myself anymore. And the hardest part is this: many of them were told there was nothing they could do except wait or take medication that made them feel weak, dizzy, or disconnected from who they are. Here's what most men are never told. An enlarged or irritated prostate doesn't appear overnight, and it isn't driven by age alone. It's fueled quietly by inflammation, hormonal imbalance, and daily habits that seem harmless on the surface. And one of the most powerful habits happens every single morning, often without a second thought: coffee. For many men, coffee is just caffeine, but from a clinical perspective, it can either aggravate prostate irritation or become a surprisingly effective daily support system, depending on what you add to it. And this is where the story changes, because I've watched men reclaim restful sleep, steadier urine flow, and a sense of control again, not through extreme measures, but through small, consistent upgrades to what they already drink. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 8 science-backed powders that men can stir into their morning coffee to support prostate comfort and function, counting down to one combination so effective that studies show it can rival certain prescription medications without the harsh side effects. Stay with me, because the difference between frustration and relief often comes down to understanding what your prostate has been asking for all along. And before we begin, I want you to listen closely, because the first ingredient may surprise you, but what it reveals about prostate health will change how you look at your morning routine forever. The first ingredient I want to talk about often surprises men because it doesn't look like a prostate supplement at all. But in my clinical experience, this is where real change often begins. I'm talking about ginger. And no, not ginger capsules, not exotic formulas, just simple ground ginger stirred into morning coffee. I've watched many men struggle with prostate symptoms that feel confusing and out of control. The pressure, the constant urge, the feeling that even after you go, your bladder never truly relaxes. What most of them don't realize is that underneath those symptoms, there's usually a quiet fire burning. Chronic low-grade inflammation. And when inflammation stays active around the prostate, it's like tightening a clamp around a hose. Flow weakens, urgency increases, sleep breaks apart. Ginger works because it goes straight to that fire. From a scientific standpoint, ginger contains compounds called gingerols and shogals, which have been shown in multiple studies to reduce inflammatory signaling and oxidative stress. In simple terms, they tell irritated tissue to calm down. When inflammation cools, the prostate presses less aggressively on the urethra, and the bladder finally gets a chance to empty more completely. I remember a patient in his mid-50s who came to me exhausted, not dramatic, just worn down. He told me, I wake up 2 or 3 times every night, and by morning I feel like I never slept. He wasn't looking for another pill. He just wanted something sustainable. He started adding half a teaspoon of ginger powder to his coffee each morning. Within a few weeks, he noticed fewer nighttime trips, not perfection, but progress. And when we checked his labs later, his prostate markers had stabilized. That's the kind of quiet win that changes how a man feels about his body again. What matters here is consistency, not intensity. Ginger isn't a stimulant. It doesn't force anything. It works gently day after day, lowering the inflammatory background noise that keeps the prostate irritated. And unlike sugary creamers or flavored syrups, ginger adds no sugar, no dairy, and no metabolic stress, just support. Now, here's the part many men miss. Ginger handles inflammation beautifully, but inflammation is only one layer of the prostate story. Beneath it lies something even more influential, something that quietly shapes prostate size and behavior over time: hormonal signaling, especially the balance between testosterone and DHT. And that brings us to the next ingredient, one that doesn't just calm irritation, but helps regulate the hormonal messages your prostate listens to every single day. And that's where things get truly interesting. After inflammation, this is where many prostate conversations become uncomfortable, because we have to talk about hormones, not in a dramatic way, but in a very practical one. In my clinic, I've learned that most men don't realize their prostate is constantly listening to hormonal signals, especially one called DHT. And when those signals are too loud for too long, the gland responds by swelling. That's where cardamom quietly changes the game. Most people know cardamom as a warm, fragrant spice in desserts or specialty coffee, but clinically it behaves very differently inside the body. Cardamom contains plant compounds that support healthier hormone metabolism and help soften the impact of DHT on prostate tissue. Think of DHT like a stuck accelerator pedal. Cardamom doesn't slam on the brakes, but it helps ease that pedal back toward neutral, so the prostate stops being constantly told to grow and tighten. I often explain it to patients this way. If inflammation is the fire irritating, the prostate hormones are the messages telling that fire whether to keep burning. Cardamom helps quiet those messages. Research has shown that spices rich in polyphenols, including cardamom, can reduce oxidative stress and influence androgen activity. That matters because oxidative stress makes prostate tissue more sensitive to hormonal signals, amplifying symptoms like urgency and weak flow. One man in his early 60s shared something that stuck with me. He told me coffee made him nervous to drink because it always sent him rushing to the bathroom. He didn't want to give it up, but he dreaded the aftermath. He began adding just a quarter teaspoon of cardamom to his morning coffee. Within a few weeks, he noticed something subtle but important. The urgency softened. Coffee no longer felt like a trigger. His PSA remained stable, and more importantly, he felt calmer in his body after drinking something he loved. Cardamom works gently. It doesn't stimulate, it doesn't suppress. It supports balance, and because it's naturally aromatic and slightly sweet, it upgrades coffee without sugar or artificial creamers that quietly worsen inflammation. That combination matters more than people realize because what you remove from coffee is often just as important as what you add. Now, here's the critical transition many men miss. Balancing hormones helps prevent further prostate irritation, but balance alone doesn't protect cells from long-term damage. Over time, prostate tissue is exposed to oxidative wear, the same kind of slow rusting that affects blood vessels and nerves. To address that deeper layer, we need something that works at the cellular level, something studied extensively for protection, not just comfort. And that brings us to the next ingredient, one that blends surprisingly well with coffee and offers one of the strongest antioxidant shields available. And this is where science starts to get very compelling. This is the moment where prostate care shifts from comfort to protection. In my practice, I've learned that calming hormones is important, but it's not enough on its own. The prostate is constantly exposed to oxidative stress, a kind of slow cellular damage that builds quietly over years. And when oxidative stress piles up, prostate tissue becomes more fragile, more reactive, and far more likely to swell. This is where matcha green tea powder enters the picture in a powerful way. Matcha isn't just green tea in powder form. Clinically, it's one of the most concentrated natural sources of antioxidants we know. In particular, it's rich in EGCG, a compound that has been widely studied for its ability to protect cells from inflammation and abnormal growth. Research has shown that EGCG helps regulate inflammatory pathways and may even slow the proliferation of unwanted prostate cells. In simple terms, it helps prostate tissue age more calmly instead of reacting aggressively to every stress signal. I often tell patients to imagine oxidative stress like rust forming inside a machine. You don't notice it at first. Everything still works. But over time, movement becomes stiff, noisy, inefficient. That's what oxidative damage does to the prostate. Matcha acts like a protective coating. It doesn't force the gland to shrink overnight, but it helps preserve healthy function so symptoms don't quietly worsen year after year. One man in his mid-50s comes to mind. He told me he avoided green tea because he hated the taste, but he also worried deeply about prostate cancer after watching his father go through treatment. He didn't want fear to dictate his future. He started blending half a teaspoon of matcha into his morning coffee. To his surprise, his energy felt steadier without jitters. Over time, his lab results stayed stable, and he lost a bit of stubborn abdominal weight, which we know further reduces hormonal pressure on the prostate. What mattered most to him wasn't a dramatic change, but peace of mind. Matcha also offers something many men appreciate without realizing it. It contains L-theanine, which smooths caffeine's effect on the nervous system. That means less tension, less nervous urgency, and fewer sudden bathroom trips triggered by stress. Coffee becomes supportive instead of provocative. And when you remove sugar and artificial creamers, matcha turns coffee into a clean, protective ritual rather than a metabolic strain. But here's the part that often surprises men. Even with inflammation-cooled hormones steadied and cells protected, the prostate still responds to what's happening in the gut and bloodstream every single day. Blood sugar spikes, excess estrogen, and poor elimination quietly feed prostate irritation. To address that deeper foundation, we need something humble, fiber-rich, and often overlooked, something that doesn't just protect cells, but helps escort hormonal waste out of the body entirely. And that brings us to the next ingredient, one that works from the inside out in a way few men ever consider. This is where prostate support becomes less about what you add and more about what your body can finally let go of. In my experience, many men calm inflammation and stabilize hormones, yet symptoms linger. And when we look deeper, the reason is often surprisingly simple. Hormonal waste isn't leaving the body efficiently. That's where ground flaxseed quietly becomes one of the most powerful allies for men over 40. Flaxseed works differently than anything we've talked about so far. It doesn't stimulate, it doesn't suppress, it escorts. Clinically, flaxseed is rich in lignans plant compounds that bind excess hormones like DHT and estrogen in the digestive tract and help carry them out of the body. When those hormones linger, they continue signaling the prostate to stay swollen and reactive. When they're removed, the gland finally gets a break. I often use a simple analogy with patients. Imagine trying to calm traffic without clearing an accident downstream. You can slow cars all you want, but congestion persists until the blockage is removed. Excess hormones are that blockage. Research has shown that men who consume lignin-rich foods like flaxseed tend to have healthier hormone profiles and more stable prostate markers over time. This isn't a quick fix. It's a cleanup strategy. A patient in his early 60s once told me he felt stuck in watchful waiting. His PSA was creeping up not dangerously, but enough to make him anxious. He didn't want to sit still and hope. He started adding 1 tablespoon of freshly ground flaxseed to his morning coffee, blending it until smooth. Over several months, 2 things changed. His cravings dropped, his waistline shrank slightly, and when we rechecked his labs, his PSA had stabilized. That kind of result doesn't grab headlines, but it restores confidence. Flaxseed also delivers omega-3 fatty acids, which further reduce inflammation, and soluble fiber that steadies blood sugar. That matters because blood sugar spikes increase insulin, and insulin amplifies hormone activity that stresses the prostate. This is why flaxseed often improves more than urinary symptoms. It changes the internal environment that allowed those symptoms to form in the first place. One detail matters here, and I always emphasize it. Flaxseed must be ground. Whole seeds pass right through the body. When ground, they integrate smoothly into coffee, adding a mild, nutty thickness that actually signals the fiber is doing its job. No sugar, no artificial additives, just steady mechanical support your body understands. But here's where the story deepens. Even when hormones are cleared and inflammation quiets, one powerful signal can still override all of that progress: DHT production itself. To truly shift prostate behavior, we have to address the source of that signal, not just its leftovers. And that leads us to the next ingredient, one that has been respected for centuries for its ability to interfere directly with DHT formation. And this is where prostate relief starts to feel noticeably different. This is the point where prostate relief stops being subtle and starts becoming noticeable. In my experience, many men reach a stage where inflammation is lower and hormone waste is clearing, yet one signal keeps driving symptoms forward. That signal is DHT production itself. And this is where black seed, also known as Nigella sativa, becomes incredibly relevant. Black seed has a long history in traditional medicine, but what matters to me as a physician is what modern research has begun to confirm. Black seed contains an active compound called thymoquinone, which has been shown to reduce oxidative stress and interfere with enzymes involved in DHT formation. In simple terms, it helps turn down the volume at the source, not just clean up the aftermath. I often explain DHT to patients like this. Testosterone is the raw material. DHT is what happens when that material gets overprocessed. When DHT levels stay high, the prostate receives a constant message to thicken, tighten, and press inward. Black seed helps interrupt that message. Not aggressively, not abruptly, but steadily enough that tissue can finally relax. One patient in his late 50s stands out in my mind. He described his symptoms as frustrating rather than painful. He felt like his bladder never fully emptied, and nighttime trips felt urgent even when volumes were small. He was skeptical of anything that sounded herbal, but he was open to data. He added a small pinch, about 1/8 of a teaspoon of black seed powder, to his morning coffee, balancing the flavor with a touch of cinnamon. Within several weeks, he noticed fewer repeat trips and less pressure after urinating. 2 months later, he told me something important. It feels quieter down there. Quieter down. That's often the first sign DHT pressure is easing. Black seed also offers another benefit men rarely connect to prostate health. Its antioxidant properties calm irritation along the urinary tract, which reduces that panicked sensation of needing to go again right after you just went. Coffee stops acting like a trigger and starts behaving like a neutral part of the day. That shift alone improves quality of life more than most men expect. Because black seed is potent, less is more. A pinch is enough. Used consistently, it supports hormonal signaling without overstimulation, and unlike sugary additives or artificial flavorings, it doesn't feed inflammation or blood sugar spikes that quietly worsen prostate stress. But here's the next critical layer. Even when DHT signaling is reduced, the prostate still depends heavily on nutrient status, especially minerals involved in tissue repair and muscular control. Without those building blocks, relaxation can only go so far. And that brings us to an ingredient. Many men completely underestimate something they've literally thrown away for years, and yet it may be one of the most effective natural tools for restoring urinary strength and flow. This is where many men finally feel a difference they can't ignore. Because once inflammation is quieter and DHT signals are softer, the prostate still needs something very specific to recover properly, nutrients that help tissue relax, repair, and coordinate urine flow. And that's where pumpkin seeds step in, often underestimated, often overlooked, yet clinically powerful. Pumpkin seeds work because they deliver a rare combination the prostate depends on. First, zinc. The prostate holds more zinc than almost any other organ in the male body, and for a reason. Zinc supports tissue repair, helps regulate hormone activity, and plays a role in muscular control around the bladder neck. Low zinc status has been associated with worsening urinary symptoms and weaker flow, and pumpkin seeds are one of the most accessible food-based sources. Then there are phytosterols, especially beta-sitosterol. These compounds have been studied for their ability to improve urinary flow and reduce the sensation of incomplete emptying. I often tell patients to imagine beta-sitosterol as a cushion rather than a clamp. Instead of forcing the prostate to shrink, it helps the tissue behave more cooperatively, so urine can pass with less resistance and less stop-and-start frustration. A man in his mid-60s once told me he dreaded nighttime, not because of pain, but because of repetition. 3 or 4 trips every single night. He didn't want another prescription. He started blending 1 heaping tablespoon of ground pumpkin seeds into his morning coffee, adding a splash of almond milk for texture. Within weeks, his nighttime trips dropped to 1, sometimes none. His flow felt steadier, and at his follow-up, even his symptom score had improved. Those are outcomes clinical trials have echoed, showing pumpkin seed preparations can perform on par with certain medications without draining energy or libido. Pumpkin seeds also provide magnesium, which helps smooth muscle tissue relax. That matters because part of urinary difficulty isn't just size, it's tension. When muscles remain tight, urgency increases. When they relax, control returns. This is why some men notice improvement not just at night, but during long drives or meetings where urgency used to feel unpredictable. There are 2 easy ways to use pumpkin seeds. You can grind raw, unsalted seeds into a fine powder and stir about 1 tablespoon into hot coffee for a mild, nutty richness. Or you can use cold-pressed pumpkin seed oil, adding 1 to 2 teaspoons for a silky texture. Either way, you're replacing artificial creamers with real nourishment your prostate recognizes. But here's the next layer most men never consider. Even with nutrients restored and flow improving, the prostate is still influenced by the immune system. Chronic immune irritation can quietly reverse progress if it's not addressed. To support that deeper defense, we need something adaptive, something that teaches the body to calm inflammation without shutting anything down. And that leads us to the next ingredient, one that has been used for centuries to support longevity and immune balance. And it may be the missing piece many men didn't know they needed. This is where prostate support moves beyond mechanics and enters a deeper layer. Most men never think about the immune system's role in prostate irritation. In my clinic, I've seen men do everything right, lower inflammation, soften hormones, restore nutrients, yet symptoms linger because the immune system is still on high alert. That's when reishi mushroom becomes incredibly relevant. Reishi isn't a stimulant and it isn't a sedative. Clinically, it's what we call an adaptogen. It helps the body respond more intelligently to stress instead of overreacting. Reishi contains beta-glucans and triterpenes compounds studied for their ability to calm chronic immune activation while preserving normal immune defense. That balance matters because an overactive immune response can keep prostate tissue irritated, even when the original trigger is gone. I often explain this to patients using a simple image. Imagine a smoke alarm that keeps going off long after the fire is out. That alarm is exhausting. It keeps the whole house tense. In the prostate, immune overreaction works the same way. Reishi helps reset that alarm so tissue can finally rest. Early research has also shown that reishi may gently reduce DHT signaling and support healthy cell turnover, adding another layer of long-term protection. A man in his early 70s once came to me, frustrated and discouraged. His medication helped, but it left him dizzy and drained. He wanted support without feeling like he was trading one problem for another. He started adding 1/2 to 1 teaspoon of high-quality reishi powder to his morning coffee. Within weeks, his energy felt steadier. By the 3rd month, his nighttime bathroom trips dropped from 3 to 1. When we reviewed his follow-up, his PSA had dipped slightly and his exam remained stable. What stood out most was his tone. He said, "It finally feels like my body isn't fighting itself anymore." Reishi blends surprisingly well with coffee. Its earthy flavor softens bitterness, and when paired with a splash of milk or cinnamon, it feels grounding rather than medicinal. This matters because daily habits only work when people actually keep them. Now, inconsistency is where reishi quietly shines. It doesn't push, it supports. Over time, it helps the prostate exist in a calmer internal environment. But here's the crucial turning point. Even when inflammation is quiet, hormones are balanced, nutrients are restored, and the immune system is steady, there's still one dominant driver that can override everything else if left unchecked: DHT signaling at the receptor level. To truly change the prostate's long-term behavior, we need to address that signal directly and decisively. And that brings us to the final ingredient, the one with clinical evidence strong enough to stand beside prescription options. And this is where everything we've discussed comes together. This is the point where everything finally connects. In my clinical experience, if there is one combination that consistently changes how men live with prostate symptoms, this is it. Not because it's trendy, not because it's loud, but because it targets the core biological driver of prostate enlargement head on. I'm talking about the combination of saw palmetto and stinging nettle root. I want to be very clear here. Most prostate discomfort isn't random. It's driven by a hormone signal that becomes too strong for too long. Testosterone itself isn't the enemy. The problem begins when it's converted into DHT, a more aggressive form that tells prostate tissue to grow inward and tighten around the urinary channel. Saw palmetto works by blocking the enzyme responsible for that conversion. In simple terms, it limits the fuel before it ever reaches the fire. But this is where many supplements fall short. Even when DHT levels drop, some of that hormone can still bind tightly to prostate receptors and continue causing symptoms. That's where stinging nettle root changes the equation. Nettle helps prevent DHT from attaching to those receptors, and it also supports healthier estrogen balance, which becomes increasingly important as men age. Together, these two don't just reduce hormone production, they reduce hormone impact. I often describe this combination to patients like this. Saw palmetto turns down the faucet, nettle wipes the floor dry. When both happen at the same time, the prostate finally gets the message to calm down. Clinical studies have shown that this pairing can significantly improve urinary flow, reduce nighttime awakenings, and lower symptom scores in some cases, matching the results of common prescription medications, but without the fatigue, dizziness, or sexual side effects that make so many men quit treatment. One man in his late 60s shared something that still stays with me. He told me his life had quietly shrunk. He planned outings around bathrooms, he avoided long drives, he woke up 5 times a night and felt defeated before the day even began. He didn't want stronger medication. He started using a high-quality saw, palmetto, and nettle blend, stirring about 1 teaspoon of powdered extract into his morning coffee with a bit of almond milk. Within weeks, his nighttime trips dropped to 2. By the 3rd month, many nights, he slept straight through. His follow-up showed reduced residual urine and a small but meaningful decrease in prostate size. But what mattered most was his voice when he said, "I finally feel in charge again." That's why this combination earns the final position. It doesn't just manage symptoms, it reshapes the signals your prostate responds to every single day. And when used consistently over 8 to 12 weeks, it allows everything we discussed before: inflammation control, hormone clearance, nutrient, repair, immune balance to actually hold. And as we step back from this final ingredient, it's important to recognize what this journey really shows. Prostate health isn't about one miracle fix. It's about layering support intelligently, choosing tools that work together instead of fighting your body. Your morning coffee doesn't have to be an empty habit anymore. It can become a daily signal to your body that you're paying attention, that you're no longer ignoring quiet warnings, and that you're choosing steady control over silent decline. As we come to the end of this video, I want to gently summarize what truly matters here. We talked about how prostate discomfort doesn't come from age alone, but from layers that build over time: chronic inflammation, hormonal imbalance, oxidative stress, nutrient depletion, and immune irritation. We explored how simple, consistent additions to something as familiar as your morning coffee can support your prostate from multiple angles, not by forcing your body, but by helping it regain balance. But more important than any ingredient is this message: your body is not betraying you. It's communicating with you. Waking up multiple times at night feeling urgency or losing confidence doesn't mean you're failing or declining. It means something needs attention. And the good news is when men listen early and act gently, the body often responds better than they ever expected. I want you to remember this. You don't have to do everything at once. You don't need perfection. Choose one small change that feels realistic for you. Give it time. Consistency always matters more than intensity when it comes to long-term male health. And if something doesn't feel right, always talk with a healthcare professional who listens to you and treats you as a whole person, not just a symptom. If this video helped you understand your body better, please take a moment to like this video so more men who need this information can find it. I also encourage you to save it, because these are the kinds of details you may want to come back to later. And if you care about staying informed with clear science-based guidance on men's sexual health, prostate health, and aging with strength, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future updates. Before you go, I'd genuinely love to hear from you. Which part of this video stood out the most? Was there one habit or ingredient you're thinking of trying? First, you can share that in the comments. I read them, and they help guide what I create next for you. You're not alone in this. Taking care of your health is not a weakness, it's an act of self-respect. And with the right knowledge and steady habits, you can protect your comfort, your confidence, and your quality of life for years to come.